Hey everybody, Joe Testa here with my good friend Russ Miller. Hey Russ, how are you?
All right, buddy. How you guys doing?
Doing good, doing good. It's funny, I was thinking about this particular interview with you, and I was thinking it's very different for me this one because of our history. It's like we're same age, kind of met early '90s, and kind of grew together, like in our career path. So it's a different perspective than most of the other ones who I grew up listening to. I actually grew with you, listening to what you and watching your career happen. So it's a different and
Right.
unique perspective, but it's exciting to be able to do this. So
Well, likewise, because when I first met you, you were the editor at Warner Brothers Publications, and
yeah,
now you're a big deal. Look at you.
yeah, right, yeah, real big. Still 5'3.5", bro. So
I'm
hey,
growing
let's
this way, so
yeah,
that's good.
I'm fighting that one too. So, um, I wanted to get started a little bit with your. I don't want to belabor too much of the history because I think I want to get into more current stuff with you musically. But I do want to give people a little bit of perspective for those who don't know you and your history. Like I know you came from Ohio and then get to Florida and then get to LA. So can you maybe just give us a little bit of that? Like you don't have to give the Reader's Digest version of that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I
Shove
grew
your
up
whole
in
life into
a.
like 30 seconds.
That's fine. That's it's not much more than that to talk about, probably. But no, I grew up. I grew up in a really small steel working town in Ohio, and there was nobody in my family that was in the music business at all. My grandfather, raised me a lot. My grandparents were there raising me a lot with my mom, and he was a big music enthusiast who listened to music all the time. So I started playing the drums when I was about 10 years old, playing big band records like Buddy Rich and Gene Krupa and Big Sick Catlett and Papa Joe Jones and Sonny Payne, all those. So I started actually taking lessons on a pad, and back then you actually took lessons for real on a pad for like 2 years before you even got a drum, and then you'd get a snare drum, and then I got like a bass drum, cymbal, hi hat, and then added some toms. And I was 5 years into playing before I even had like a full drum set. But you learn how to read, you learn proper technique. And I went to a school, a high school where you could major, like a vocational school, but they had a music as one of the majors, which was incredible. And so I majored in music, and I was in every band you could be in, basically, like wind ensemble and marching band, and I marched with the drum corps in Canton, Ohio, and did played musicals and all this stuff, and then started doing professional gigs when I was 15. So I was playing a lot, doing a lot of stuff in school, music theory, everything, and then went to the University of Miami, where I moved to Miami, and then studied down there in studio music and jazz performance, and then worked in that area with the whole crew of people from Miami, the whole Gloria Estefan pack of people from Miami. And then in '95, I moved to Los Angeles. I was touring, and I thought, oh, this is an opportunity for move to LA. I always wanted to be, a session drummer. Some of my heroes were like, Jeff Picaro and Carlos Vega and J.R. Robinson and Gad and all the guys that were doing a lot of records. And so then I moved here in '95, and yeah, that's pretty much the rest is history. It's been 20. What is it? I don't know how long it's been. Almost 30 years, like 25 or
Mhm.
26 years of
Yeah,
being in LA and working here and touring and so on and so forth.
yeah, no, that's good. That's great. It's amazing. Like you were talking about your high school experience, and I was just thinking to myself, I wonder how many people have that opportunity today. It's so
Yeah.
different. You know,
It's so different, right? And music education, of course, is a big issue. But, I think the whole challenge right now, to be honest, with all of the playing is for us, like, I played 1,000,000 gigs, man. I mean, just every horrible gig you could possibly think of, you know, from the Cohen bar mitzvah to the backyard pool thing to, I mean, we just played all the time with bands and with other players. And even through college, I paid my way through college in house bands. I mean, you remember being in Florida, like City Limits and they were like these big clubs with a 9-piece house band with horns, and we played 9 to 3 every day, like 6 nights a week. And then we'd go do jazz gigs during the day on Saturday. And I mean, I think just for these generations, I think the challenge right now is getting out of the bedroom with their camera and playing music with other people, because I don't think anybody starts playing, the dream of playing and having fun making music is, to be by yourself. I think it's to be done with other players, and that's what it's all about, is communicating first with the people on stage and then with the people in the audience.
Yeah. And what's ironic too is that you used to have, I was talking to Benny Greb about this the other day, and it used to be that you would have to try really hard to find material of your heroes. You'd find every record that Gad was on or something. You'd buy every tape or whatever. Try to stay up late at night to see Saturday Night Live or any one of the late night shows to see one of your.
Big deal to. I mean, that was like the thing with the LP, right? Like if the Rush record came out and it showed a picture of Neil Peart's drums, you were like, "This is freaking awesome!" Because I mean, we didn't even get to see, unless you went to the concert or until MTV started. And at the beginning of MTV, it was dope. They, the Journey live in Houston. I remember seeing that live on TV, and you're going, I'm watching Steve Smith live, but it was like we didn't even get to see what the guy's drums were,
Yeah.
I mean, that's why. Do you remember the Zildjian artist set?
Yeah.
Book?
Oh yeah.
That
Cymbal
was
setups.
that's why that was so huge back then, because it was like we got all the setups from all the guys, and it was like, this is incredible. Like to know like what cymbal the guy's using. Now it's like like what the guy's having for lunch every day.
Yeah, well, that's the issue that we were talking about, where it's like, now to be really good, you have to discipline yourself to block things out, because there's so much input that you get distracted so easy. Your focus is gone. And I was like, that's really kind of ironic,
Yeah, and then the visibility of mediocrity is very high.
Yeah.
Right? We didn't have that because there was somebody to say no before.
Yeah.
Like, the record label was, no, that's not a good idea, or whatever. Or DCI Music Video was not going to film a video with somebody that wasn't happening, and it was like, if a video showed up, it was Elvin and Gad and, Yogi Horton and all those original videos where we were flipping out about the fact that I could watch Steve Gadd play in an intimate setting like that. I mean, that was a big deal, but there was somebody to say no. So now there's nobody to say no. So the visibility of everything until it's great is there. And that's what you got to weed through.
Yeah.
That's the challenge.
Yeah, totally is. Well, all right. So been a crazy year and a half with COVID and everything. And you're one of the few guys I know that's been working through COVID. And I wanted to, and you have a unique talent in that you're good at a lot of different things. And one of them is performing, one of them is creating actual instruments, and the other side is just knowing business and education. Like, you have a pretty good handle on all those different things. But to serve, and I want to know how that played a part in your survival over the last year and a half.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny. I called Weckl, I don't know how long ago. I don't know what we were doing. Maybe it was his birthday or party or something. But we're talking about like what was going on, and it was literally like, hey, how different does your life look? It's like, yeah, not really that much different. I mean, the touring thing obviously stopped, but as far as like what I do almost every day, which is being in a place like this, in the recording studio and making either movies or records or some form of media creation thing, it didn't change that much. I work alone, unfortunately, a lot at my studio, which is where we're at now. It's a new facility, but it was still. I mean, what happened, to be honest, was for the whole beginning of it, it didn't look too much different because there was a lot of things in production, movies that we were working on and stuff that was already in production. And then as it went really long, that stuff started to die off because they couldn't continue the productions as much. But one of the things that I've done a lot over the years is through either the success of certain records or movies or tours or whatever, a lot of foreign artists would hire me. Like I play on a lot of material for like Korean stars like Lee Moon-se, or famous singers from India like Kavita Krishnamurti, or just people from all over the world. So I would get those sessions in and just be working on them, and then like you mentioned the business thing. I mean, reality is, no business can rock the same business plan for 50 years. I mean, Apple invents the personal computer, and now they sell phones and downloads. So I mean, not even if Apple can't keep the same business plan, then we can't either. But a lot of musicians push back really hard on that. Where they take that business plan from 1975, which is I'm going to learn how to play the drums really well, and people are going to hire me, and I'm going to do records and gigs, and that's all I got to do. And they think I'm just going to rock that business plan right to the grave. But you can't. I mean, you got to be able to do what we're doing here. We have 5 4K cameras and audio and streaming and switchers and lighting, and all that stuff is a part of changing your business plan to operate, just like we did when electronics came, right? When it was like, what do we do now? We got to learn to play with a click really well, and we got to be able to fire samples and trigger the drums. And to be honest with you, we were doing a lot more with electronics back then than I see people do with now, really.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, if you remember, like in the early 80s, guys like myself or Chris Ryan or Tony Verderosa or something, we were already alternating notes, MIDI notes, and playing melodies. I remember before I went to college in Miami, I had a gig with the Akron Ballet. And what I did is I went in every day to their rehearsals with a drum cat, and it was like a drum cat and maybe like a one of the pedals they made back then, and like a hi-hat pedal, bass drum pedal. And I would improvise, a la Juliana and what those guys are doing now with the acoustic sounds. We would improvise for the ballet rehearsals, and they would just go, this is an 11, and I would play like melodies on tuned instruments on the cat and play like some percussion, all in electronics, and alternate notes to play melody lines and things like in 11, so they could practice. And I did that every day, and I don't, I paid my bills. So it was like, whatever. I don't know. I just, whatever it took to play and to, keep moving forward, and for me, it was like finding cool musical things was awesome. But for me, the whole thing was about, I just want to play. If I play with the ballet, that's awesome. If I play with Andrea Bocelli with a symphony, that's awesome. If I play with the psychedelic furs, that's awesome. I mean, I find the art in each part of it, and I try to get there,
Yeah,
because it all has an art.
Yeah, that's the key. Finding good music, just period. Doesn't matter what type. The only decent music is good music, right? Like, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Style.
I mean, that's a challenge of the session thing, because there's records where you get called for a session and you're like, this sucks,
Yeah.
But I gotta do it with intention and like that, and be.
You still got to do. You guys still got to deliver your part. Yeah.
Yeah, and just be happy that I only have to play it once or twice. But it's a tour is different. It's like, that's why I don't tour as much, because it's like I really gotta like the music, man. Like, I gotta play that every night for 2.5 hours. Like, I gotta dig that music, or I hate it.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Well, you had mentioned a little earlier about movie soundtracks and stuff. So I think one of the most recent ones that just came out that you were on was Onward, right?
That's like the last one that was in the theaters, right?
It was in the theater, yeah.
Shut down. Yeah.
Let's watch a video clip of that, And then I want, if you don't mind, I'd like to talk a little bit about that experience of a movie experience. When you go in for a session for a movie date.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Day 3, orchestra, onward, big group out there, almost 100 players, and we're excited to be here with these amazing filmmakers and this great band. It's a great band.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
I gotta know what it's like to play with the string section. I heard it feels like you're pulling an 18-wheeler with your teeth, trying to, because they're always behind you.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, I do a lot of that, from, live stuff to session stuff. A little easier with the session thing because everybody's got to click most of the time. But like, lots of times I just go to the conductor like, look, man, you can count me in, but after I start, I'm running this show. Like, I'm not watching you, and they got to play with me, and you got to pull them in. I mean, there's times where I literally stand up and go, guys, one is not this. One. One is like one. That's one. And, yeah, it's a little bit like that. They have their articulation and the way that they can phrase things, but really great orchestras, LA Phil or whatever. It's the same with horn players. There's a lot of times where I'm playing with a big band or stuff, and the horns are so behind. You're like, you guys are killing me. Like, you got to play up. I mean, come on. I mean, that's the great thing about Tower Power, right? Like those horns, they're
it's unbelievable. Yeah,
they're spot on. But yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah. So, what is a typical? Give me a typical movie date, like source piece and the cues and.
I put my convertible down and my sunglasses on, and I drive. No, there's two kinds of pieces of music in a movie. There's a source cue, right? Which is a source cue could be, we could license a Rolling Stones song, or you could be like, actually, that footage you just saw of Onward. There's a part of the movie that's sort of like a rock band playing, and the guy's father who passed away when they were young, he comes back in this magical sorcery thing, but they screw it up, and they only bring him back from the waist down. So it's actually a great movie. It's really funny and very awesome. But so they're dancing with like their father, but it's only from the waist down, and it's this song. It's almost Journey-ish. That's a source cue where it's like it's just a song that becomes a part of the movie in some way, right? Or there's a cue. A cue is like scored to some, like a car chase, right? That's like a cue. So that could go anywhere from 5 seconds to 5 minutes or 10 minutes. It depends on how long the scene is. And the big trick about movie stuff is, one, you're not there to play some magical drum fill that's going to set Matt Damon's world on fire in the middle of the movie. That's number one. Number two, they don't film movies in 4/4. So that's a big thing. There's a lot of odd times because if you're playing along with the thing and it takes a bar of 7/16, I mean, you could be in 4, but then there's a bar of 7/16 to the cut of that scene. That's what it is. So there's a lot of crazy. I mean, I've had like crazy count offs, like the count offs in 5/16, and then we're going to 9/8 for 2 bars, and a bar of 4, and then we're in 11, for 2 bars, and then to make all those different cuts. I mean, it's not a Genesis album. It's trying to make those cuts, and so it's a tremendous amount of high level reading. And I think the biggest thing is with the orchestra, it's like 30,000 an hour to keep the orchestra on the floor. So you just can't be the guy to make everybody do it again. That's really the thing. Like if everybody's got to do it again,
yeah, that goes over well.
Like, you will not be there very long. So
it's funny.
It's a little frightening when you first start doing it. It's like you got to wear a diaper.
Yeah. What was your first movie? Do you remember?
The first movie that I did that was it was Boondock Saints, which was big movie. And it wasn't a big movie then when it came out, but it became like a cult classic. It's a really famous series. And then I did the sequel years later called All Saints Day. But that was like when I first moved to LA, like 95, 96, 96 by the time I started doing that. And I just got referred by a bass player that I met on a jazz gig and to one of the film composer guys. And then, they just, if you do a good job, they hire you just like everybody else, just like a band does or whatever. And
And
they do 2 or 3 movies a year. So you get another guy does 2, 3 movies, another guy does 2, 3, you get 5, 6 guys, then you're working a lot. And I don't know how many I've done, man, a lot,
yeah.
a couple hundred.
Now, how does the movie thing differ from the TV thing? Because I know you do both.
Yeah, the TV thing's a little bit different because the movie thing might have anywhere from a couple cues to maybe 50 or 60 or 80. It depends on how much music. I mean, a song like Star Wars is like music top to bottom, but some movies don't have music all through the movie. A TV show it's a bigger long-term picture, of what you're doing. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? That's like our sign. When we're in the studio, we're saying like, what are we doing? But it's like you got to come up with a path. Like, what are we, and you could come up, like, a lot of times we'll come up with something like, okay, this is a sci-fi thing. But we want to use African, like, tribal rhythms, but with tones that aren't, natural organic tones, and so that's like a path. And then we stick on that path to try to keep that thing going forever, how long it goes. It could be a couple seasons or 4 or 5, 10, who knows. But just keeping because it becomes a part of the TV show, the sound of the soundtrack and what it is, versus a movie is, one set of stuff for that movie and then it's done. This could go on for years depending on what it is. So you have to think that way about, okay, what am I going to do here that I can only do from a feel, from a touch, from a sound, all that stuff.
Yeah. And I know you did a stint, if I remember correctly, with American Idol, and that had to be kind of a high pressure. Oh yeah, there you go. That had to be a little bit of high.
I had black hair when I started, and I had gray hair when I came out of it.
That's what it did to you. So that was a high pressure gig, right? So, like, give me a little rundown on that.
Idol, it was, yeah, man, there was a lot of, it's the biggest music show in the world that has very little to do with music, but it's, there's a lot of, I mean, they were writing the arrangements in the hallway, man, and bringing them and putting them on the stand, for filming. And so there was a lot of references, and it was interesting. It really reminded me of a couple things, a lot of, the TV stuff. They want, like, oh, we want 20-year-old guys. It's like, great, I get it. But, the problem was in some of those situations, you have to know a tremendous amount of songs because there's all these references, like, okay, this is Lady in Red, but we're going to play it like the Goo Goo Dolls, and then you got to know, like, what's Lady in Red? Oh, yeah, I know that song. And then, oh, who's the Goo Goo Dolls? Yeah, and I know that sound. And then how do I bring them together? And be able to do that. But one of the things I'll tell you that was really a trip is, like, I have in-ears, right, like I'm wearing now, and I would have my monitor feed for the band and everything. But Jimmy Iovine he invented Beats with Dr. Dre. So Jimmy was like, hey, Miller, you got to wear the Beats headphones. So the whole band had Beats headphones on, but I didn't dig the way they sounded. So I used my in-ears. And but what happened is Justin, my drum tech at the time, you remember Justin?
Yeah.
For me for years. He put YouTube in the Beats, and I would have the feed in my in-ears. So if a tune came up that I didn't know, like mostly like a modern tune, like some Lady Gaga song or whatever that I wasn't hip to, he would, between the time they put it on the stand and the time we played, maybe 30 seconds to a minute, he would go to YouTube and play the song in the Beats over top of my in-ear so I could get a reference of, like, the sound and the beat. And then we would have to quickly call up, like, some electronic sounds on a DTX pad or something, or a trigger, and then, so that it sounded like that, And so it was really high pressure. And one of the things that I really remember a lot was having my palette of sounds like was so important. Like my hand clap, my small hand clap, my big hand clap, my 808 toms, my 808 bass drum, just all those things that were, it had to be able to just come up like that, really fast and be able to get to that. So yeah,
Yes.
that was it.
That's awesome. You never told me about the YouTube thing. That's
Yeah, it was
genius.
great. But I remember calling Christine, my wife, like I'd be driving away from, Interscope or wherever we were, Santa Monica, and I would be like, man, my brain is fried. Like I want to go do like a blues gig for like 3 hours.
Yeah, that was like on 10 for like hours, right?
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned your sound, like having your sounds ready, but I wanted to talk about a little bit about that. Not just, well, first and foremost, let's talk a little bit about the sounds you have now. Like I'm looking at your cymbal setup and your drums and everything. Is this the cymbal setup you use for everything, or you for the most part, and then do you like bring in other things when needed? But this is
if you go to the overhead once. This cymbal setup is like my primary cymbal setup that goes everywhere all the time, and then I would augment it slightly. But just to run through it, this is a K Custom Special Dry 10-inch splash, and then this is the tuner set of hi-hats for the 14-inch Avedis. This is a 18-inch Avedis. This is a Constantinople version of the staccato ride with 4 rivets in it. This is the new staccato ride that we just released in the custom shop,
which we will go over soon.
Yeah, and this is a set of 15-inch Carope hi-hats that I use more like an effect stack and then hi-hats depending on how I do it. But this is a 17-inch A custom that you probably remember. I've had this cymbal for like 25 years. I took it off a booth at PASIC one time.
Yeah.
I was sitting down like playing and I hit that cymbal. They just had it demonstrated just like a display, and I was like, I'm so sorry, I have to take this cymbal. And like got Johnny D or whatever. I'm like, I had to take this cymbal from the Gretsch booth. Can you replace it? But I've used it ever since. And then this is a 19-inch Carope with cluster hammering that we did in prototyping a while back. And
very nice.
This is like the core setup. And it's about, for me, I play a lot of different styles of music, so it's about covering those styles, but it's also about my familiarity with this instrument and me knowing what sounds that I can get out of it and how to get those sounds out of it. And that's really important, that you're really familiar not only with the drums but the cymbals, because there's a lot of tones in here and I have to be able to extract those out. So that's super important to know the setup.
Yeah. And I wanted to talk about how did you develop that sound? Like, how did you get to the point of knowing which cymbals were right for you and for what you would use probably most often? But then, how did that happen?
Well, listen, my friend Adam Nussbaum my first lesson with Adam, there was 2 things that he told me that was really important. The first was, what's the first thing that happens when you touch the instrument? And, I was like, oh, well, you create a pulse, you make a tone, you play a beat. It's like, no, you make a sound, and you're asking everyone to deal with that and to listen to that and to enjoy that and be entertained by that. So that's number 1. So for me, I always think about what things sound like when I'm playing, because there's a lot of drumistic things that you can play that are cool drum stuff. And, I'm doing all this crazy stuff. But you know what? It just doesn't sound good. And that's the thing. Like, you got to stop being a drummer and go, this is fast, or this is cool, or this is interesting from a drumming standpoint, and go, what is the sound that I'm making for the band and for the audience? That's number 1. Number 2, it's the Indian, not the arrow, right? Like, it's how you touch the drums. Like, let me give you some examples. Like, I'll show you. I'll touch the drums one way and then change it, and I'll show you how things sound different. So I'm trying to have a dynamic curve and interplay in everything that I do, and also try to be very aware of what tones are coming out of the various instruments. You know, from a rim shot to tip sounds on a snare. But, you know, one of the things that's really important is understanding the consistency of which tone you're getting out of the instrument. From the tip sound to, you can hear the rim shots are consistent and the tip sound is consistent. I'm not doing this. Where those backbeats are sounding different every time. And the same thing is happening with the cymbals, where I'm going to a cymbal like the staccato. For me, I use this cymbal a lot as a crash, you know, and I need to be able to pull that crash sound out and get to the tip. So I get back to the tip sound or the riding sound like this.
Yeah, that ride cymbal is great, man. Like, we should, since we're here, since you hit it, we should talk about it a little bit, because it just came out in the concept shop, and it does exactly what you just said. I mean,
look at that thing. You kidding me? I want to get 4 of those for my car. Use them as pumpkins.
No, but tell a little bit how that came about, like what you're thinking behind it and why you designed it the way you did.
Well, here's one. Here's the custom shop one, like, so I don't have to take it off the stand. But, you know, this cymbal, it took us like over 3 years to get this thing to do what I wanted it to do. And the reason it's called staccato is because all the sounds are short, right? The tip, it's got a bell. It's very short. The crash is a very short sound. And really what I wanted was Roy Haynes's flat ride sound that I could crash, you know, and then a bell. So it's not really a flat ride at all. But I wanted it to feel like a flat ride, that beautiful tip articulation that you get on a flat ride. And so having the body of this thing be really, if you look at the bow of it, it's kind of hard to see, but it's like almost like a flat ride. It's so flat looking. If I do it at the right angle there, but it's really difficult to get a cymbal to do that. So what we ended up doing is we ended up taking a formula that we found for the bow and the bell. The bell is the same bell that's like on that 17-inch Crash. It's not a big bell. It's a very small bell. So one of the things that I have a problem with is if it's a really big bell, it affects the pitch, but it also affects the volume of the bell in relation to the overheads, right? So what happens is I have a tip sound, and then when I go to the bell, like say a big bell, it overpowers that tip sound, and it kind of takes up the sonic space in the overheads in the room. I want the bell to place well within the cymbal so it doesn't jump out. That was part of it. Then we want the tip sound that really like a flat ride, and then I want to be able to crash it. So what we ended up doing was actually making there was a 21-inch Rarities K-Custom cymbal that I had for a long time that R&D made me, and it was amazing. It just didn't crash. You know, K-Custom, they're very thick and they don't really crash. They have a great riding tone, but we made a K-Custom Rarities 21-inch and then lathed it after it was like done. And there's a special hammering, and there's also special hammering on the bottom around the crown and around the outside of the cymbal to give it a lot of movement. I mean, this cymbal has you can bend it really easy, and it has a lot of movement to it. And
the outer edge too has even thinner, right? At the very end, at the edge of the cymbal?
Thinner at the very end, yeah. It's like lathed deeper. And that gives it sort of that movement of the cymbal that you can see, which, you know, there's a fine line, you know, when you get a really thin cymbal, it's awesome at the near field, which is here. But of course, because there's always a discussion point about what something sounds like near field versus from the audience perspective. Because a lot of times you over mute the drums because you want it to be dry and punchy here. But what happens is it's already dry and punchy out there by the time it's getting through the mic and into the house and through the speakers. And then when you over mute it so that you have your near field, then it's dead out there, you know. So you're constantly balancing like what is a great near field sound and what is projecting. So if you really thin the cymbal out, you'll get that wobbly, awesome old school thing, but it doesn't project. You know, you change the perspective of the cymbals within the drums and the drum kit and in the music, because a lot of really thin cymbals don't project that well. They're great if you're playing light and the band is light, but you got to find that balance.
It's interesting because everything you talk about seems to go back to knowing or having learned over time how what you play goes through the microphones and gets to tape.
Yeah.
It like not just what you talked about with the staccato, right? Where you're talking how the bell is, you know, you don't want to overpower every time you hit the bell. You want it to fit right in the right side, you know, the way the mix right. And then, but your touch and your feel, and then like the sonics of your drums and your cymbals and how they all work together. And then I remember even with your drum set crash course book, it was very much about where the placement of the notes were. Like you could be in tempo, but if everything in between each major tempo markings are not lined up right, it feels terrible.
Yeah, I hear a lot of players do a lot of things that, you know, would challenge capturing it well. And that's really the discussion point. Again, it's got to sound good, right? Because like we're using mics and stuff here. Like if I do this, I mean, it's cool drum stuff, but you know, it sounds better if I clear it up like this. There's a clarity of precision inside of that's really important. The other thing that's really important is your mix of what's coming from the drums in the stereo image. So I'll give you an example. If I play a funky beat like this, part of what's making that funky sounding is that small note motion that's created. If I play the hi-hat too loud, or if I play the ghost note level too loud, the articulation of that motion changes, and it becomes notes in the pattern versus motion in the pattern, right? So the pattern is boom, boom, bop, boom, 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 bop, doom, boom, boom, bop. That's the pattern, and between it, boom, got, boom, boom, got, boom, got. It's creating that motion. If I bring those up, it becomes a part of the pattern, and it's not motion anymore, and it changes the way it feels and sounds in the room and with the drums. Now it just kind of sounds busy, you know, and the hi-hat's too loud. A lot of players, I think, struggle with their riding hand being really loud, right? So this... when you bring that riding hand up, it changes the mix of the drums, and then what happens is the engineers can't use the overheads and the room mics as a part of the drum sound because now the mix is not correct. And they can't fix it because it's a stereo image, right?
Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes I see a lot of drummers go, that's not my job. My job's to play the drums. You get the, and it's true, but I think the more you make the guy out front's job easier, maybe a little, it makes everybody's life a little easier.
Yeah, I dig, but that's like saying I'm not responsible for what comes out of my mouth.
Right.
You're responsible to interpret it correctly.
Right.
That's not correct. It's like I have to be responsible for what I say for you to interpret it. And that's like the thing from the drums. And you know, look, the whole thing comes down to I have this little metaphor. It's like, look, I can have a gun with 1,000 bullets, but if I miss what I'm shooting at, if I can't shoot at the mark, a guy can come in with one bullet with a pistol and bam, right, bullseye.
Right.
And that's kind of like the drum thing where you go, you can have a powerful gun with all this facility, but you can't put it where it's supposed to be, what needs to happen. And this guy strolls in with one bullet and bam, hits a bullseye with it. He doesn't have anywhere near the facility, but he knows exactly where to put that thing. And it's sort of like that with the drums. Like the real trick is to have all that ability and the facility, but also know exactly where the bullseye is in everything that you're doing. And you don't get views on YouTube for that, but you know, you make a living in the music business doing it. So.
Right. Well, it's interesting you said that because you got to have, it seems like you have to have a deep vocabulary, but how do you obtain that vocabulary, but then also create your own style and then know what to play like properly, you know, how to play properly with that, you know, like I see a lot of guys like know how to play mad licks, you know, and they throw them in everywhere, and you're kind of like, God, it really is distracting from the music, you know. And how do you do that?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, finding your own voice thing is really difficult. I don't think I even figured out what I was attempting to do for a long time, especially because I was doing a lot of different music with a lot of different people. You know, I'm playing with Andrea Bocelli and I'm playing with the Psychedelic Furs. I couldn't be more opposite. You know, one's in a tux and one's got a mosh pit, you know, and you know, so for me, it took me a long time to understand that it wasn't going to be a Phil Collins approach where I can do a gated compressed drum sound and not hit a lot of cymbals, and then there's much more to Phil than that, but that's a very big picture of Phil, right? You hear that gated room, compressed sound, and there's a lot of times where he doesn't. I mean, in the air tonight, there's no cymbals. I don't know if you ever noticed that, but or Stuart Copeland's high-pitched snare drum and splash cymbals, or Manu Katche's splash cymbals and open ringing snare, and there's different things that you can do if you're in a band or if you're in a situation where you can control that environment. When you're doing a lot of different styles, you can't do that. So it comes down to how you touch the instrument and how you make things feel. And it took me a long time to go, okay, I'm going to have a lot of dynamics. I'm going to really try to be very expressive and articulate, and try to really keep a sound consistency out of the drums and a feel consistency, right? Because for me, like, I can change, like, here's the way I would think of it. Like, this is the way I would approach a beat. So I'll play it like I wouldn't, then I'll play it like I would. So I'm consciously being over articulate. That's kind of part of my thing, I think, is being the articulation level is very high.
Dynamics too.
Dynamics, yeah. So, and I always, to me, I heard, when I heard Buddy play, it wasn't the I heard the bing boom, da boom, ba boom, bing boom boom, bing boom boom, bing boom boom. I heard the melodies that he was playing on the toms. Like, a lot of drummers saw the left hand and the snare. And you're looking at sort of the drum stuff of that. But what I was hearing was ba, beep, boom, beep, boom, beep, boom, beep, boom, ba, boom, boom, beep, boom, beep, boom, right? I was kind of hearing the big picture. And the other stuff to me was all part of the motion and the excitement and the drive of it. But I heard, it was almost like a horn player. I mean, the great guys who, like Nussbaum's a great example, or Jeff Hamilton, Kenny Washington, those guys who, when they play a fill, it's, beep, boom, ba, dee, boom, 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 ba, da, boom, da, 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 boom, ba, do, ba, da, da, boom, ba, dee, bo, beep, boom, boom, ba. It's like a sax player playing a fill in the song, and you can hear the melody or the big picture of it, and the other minutia is just there to make it feel good and make it in time and make it feel funky. And I think that's the thing for me, was understanding that all the little parts are tools to get the big parts to speak, and not get wrapped up in all the little stuff.
Yeah, it's almost like talking to Dennis today about Gad, and he was saying, sometimes Gad just plays quarters.
That's it.
And it feels unbelievable.
Like the swing, the swing thing he does. And you're like, he hasn't played a swing beat yet, the old tune like that. It was, and again, it stemmed out of the core part of playing a swing thing is the quarter notes, right? And that's where a lot of people make the mistake, because they play this ding da ding da ding da ding, and if you listen to that, let's say I play. Here's a great exercise where I play quarter notes with my right hand or my left hand, and then I just play. That is not as easy as it looks, because a lot of people rush the third partial of the triplet. So they're doing this ding da ding da ding da ding da ding, and if you listen to that, this is what the quarter note's doing: ding da 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 ding. It's rushing the second note, ding da ding da ding da ding da ding ding, not laying it in a nice quarter. So when I really start to play it, you feel the quarter notes through the whole thing. A really effective swing groove, it's as strong as a rock beat. I mean, it's there. Buddy, man, I mean, geez, there's a record, Sammy Davis live at the Sands with Buddy's band. Everybody, if you don't own that, please buy that, immediately right now. Leave this session and go purchase that record. I mean, just the first tune alone, Buddy's like shredding. The time is ridiculous. And the first fill is so killing that you can hear the audience do like a standing ovation for the drum fill in the song. It's like, when do you hear that? Like the audience like go nuts for the drums in the middle of a song while a guy's singing.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
It is definitely. And it's really that. I love that exercise. That's a really good exercise.
And it's not easy. It's really
it does.
Easy to do.
Sure, it isn't.
Especially to line it up.
That's very cool. Speaking of fills, you just talked about Buddy's fill there. How do you? I know you have exercises, and this is why I'm bringing it up. But if you wanted to get good at playing fills, and first of all, when do you play the fill? When's the right time to play a fill? And then when you do play a fill, do you memorize your fills? Do you improvise your fills when you're going through? Because I know some people will actually learn licks and try to find a moment in a song to play it. And some guys will be like, no, I just play the music what I feel at the moment.
Right.
How do you approach that?
I mean, the challenge of that grab bag thing that I think I've talked about before, which is, gathering up this grab bag of stuff that, it's like I saw, Chris Coleman do it, or Thomas Lang, or Weckel, or, whoever, and you stuff it into this bag, and then you go to play, and then, in the middle of the song, it's like, here comes a fill. And in my brain, I reach down into my grab bag and I'm like, okay, let me see. I got this Weckel fill. That was pretty dope. I got, this Thomas Lightman, that one's not going to work. Let's see. I got, this one's cool, but it might be too fast. I mean, the entire time that you're doing that, you have ceased to play music and started playing drums,
Right.
And so, what I do with that, and look, when we were younger, that was really the thing was, we would see somebody play and we would take a piece of it, and turn it into another version of that. Look at Simon Phillips. It's a big piece of Billy Cobham, but he turned it into a different thing with more of a rock flair, with more of a, he's got it's a rock Billy Cobham, with a lot of colors, consistent colors, and he's got a very consistent sound, beautiful sound,
Yeah.
a wide open, big sound.
It sounds gorgeous.
If you take a look at Vinnie Colaiuta, Vinnie is, big picture. It's Tony Williams and Gadd, big picture. Obviously it's a lot of other things, but big picture. And the freedom of Tony Williams later in his career, where it was just like an artist painting in front of you, but with the execution level of Gadd, and you were going for, I can see those things. So what I don't want to see is you sounding like somebody else, like setting up like it's sounding like, there's a lot of that now. And it doesn't make any sense because like that guy already said that. It's like me setting up like Neil Peart. I love Neil Peart. I love Rush, but he said that. Like there's parts of what I do that there's stuff from Neil. I love that. One of the things that I do is he would play cymbals in the middle of fills. Like, and that's like something that I stole from him, but I do it in a different way. I throw my stick down. So there's like an example of taking something and changing it, where unless I told you that that's what it's from, you might not recognize that necessarily. But the thing for fills for me is like it's about being able to move around and articulate within certain flows of notes, right? So if the tune is 16th notes, I need to be able to continue the 16th note flow, because if my fill is not based on 16th, like if I got a great groove going, like, right? I don't want to play triplets, right? It just doesn't sit in that feel. So I need to be able to, I'm playing 16th notes. Can I move around this instrument and articulate a flow of notes and say something in 16th notes? So like in my books, what I would do is work on facility development, starting with a single sticking, and it could be anything. It could be, let's do like 6-tuplet, like 16th triplets, right, left, foot. You can see like I move it around the whole kit, right? So like it could be anything, any sticking, and I move it around all the different voices. First play it on the snare, then maybe interplay the kick, and then move it around different voicing. So if I take, let's say, a paradiddle diddle type sticking, and then just do that with it. So I start to move it around all the instruments. All right, so that's just one sticking. So then when I start to combine them together, you start to gain a facility to move around in that note flow. So if I'm playing something in that note flow, I can move around the kit freely and have ideas. So, I mean, that's kind of the process or the attempt to do it is in that way I can keep that flow going and have freedom to, create something unique at that time, something that's inspired by what's going on around me musically and not be stuck. To me, to be honest, man, it's like you going, "Hey, tell me about your daughter Joey," and I go, "Dude, my SL AMG car is incredible." And you're going, "That's not what we were talking about." Like I asked you about your
You're like,
daughter.
where did that come from? Yeah.
Where did that come from? That's kind of what it's like. It's like I'm having a conversation that we're not having.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
It's
I wanna
happening
be
a
able
lot
to-
lately.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be able to interact in our conversation.
Yeah.
The other guys in the band.
Well, I want to ask you a question about practice. When you have to learn a new piece of music, something technically that you've never done before, you have to learn it, you have to master it and be able to play it. How do you approach that from a practice standpoint? Like how do you sit down and get that into your brain correctly so you can then spit it out perfectly?
Yeah, there's a couple things. Like when you're playing a song in the studio, I don't get a chance to practice it necessarily, right? So like that approach is different. Like I stole something from Gad years ago. Steve played on my record Arrival back in the day, and
Great
it was
record.
incredible to sit through a session, like an entire session where he's playing on my record. So I was there the whole time, and it was awesome because we flew to New York. I think I told you that story. We flew to New York, me and Chaka, the producer. We pay for the hotel, we pay for the flights, we pay for the cab. We get there, we pay for the studio, we do the whole thing. Gad plays at one time and it's amazing, and we're like, Chaka looks at me and he goes, "Well, that was great." I was like, "Yeah, that was great." He goes, "Should he play it again?" I'm like, "I ain't telling him to play it again. You tell him to play it again." I ain't telling him to play it again. He's like, "Well, we came all the way over here and it was only 3.5 minutes long." And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know, what you tell him, So, but it was, what he did, and I stole it from him, and I love him dearly, as you know. He's a great friend of ours, and he would not play a note on the drums. He would come in and we would listen to the song. He would take the chart. He would make notes, ask questions, do all this stuff. And then he went out, bam, and he painted the picture. And that was it. And it was like when I see an artist do that, what's the cat on TV with the big hair?
Yeah, I know. I forget his name. Bob Ross. That's it. Yes, yes.
He had the big fro, and he would paint. And he was like, "Look at my lovely tree. I love this lovely tree." And
feeling happy today.
Oh my gosh, it was. I mean, but you couldn't peel your eyes away from this dude. But what it was you were watching this guy create something on the fly that is only going to happen this one time. Even if tomorrow we said, "Hey, come back and paint another forest picture," it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be the same. And that's the exciting part of when an artist sits down to play, not a drummer, not a utilitarian musician who's playing someone else's stuff. It's an artist to really create and to say something. It's like, this is an opportunity to see this happen live one time. And in a studio, it's the same thing. It's that's what was said with that picture of that forest that day. And so it was about listening. What is this picture that we're going to paint? Finding out what it is, taking notes, asking questions, doing that, and then go out and paint the picture, and so that's a different approach to versus me learning a piece of music. And learning a piece of music, I suck at it, to be honest. Like Steve Smith, good friend of mine, and we talk a lot. And there was a couple times where he was like playing with the Buddy Rich band, and then playing with the Indian guys, and then playing with Vital Information, and then memorizing everything. And I'm
That's
like,
what I mean.
How are you memorizing? What are we doing? Like, how are you memorizing all this music? Like, and this is not play a groove in 4 for 3 minutes.
No.
This is like soloing in 15, and then the heads in 11, and then and the more you do it, the better you get at it. And because I don't do it as much, I suck at it. Like, what I have to do is write it out. If I write out the chart and I write the figures, it, for some reason, once I see something and I play it once, I know it forever. Like, I could play songs. I could go back and play the Psychedelic First Show right now. I would know all the songs, but it's like, once it's in there, but I got to get it in there. And so for me, it's a combination of listening and writing. So I write things out. I write the hits out. Even if I have a chart, I go through it and I make some notes and I write things in. So I'm seeing that those figures in my brain sometimes when I'm playing it, and learning to memorize something like that. It's hard for me to memorize stuff because I don't play music. I don't get to play the same music a lot, except for a rival like my band or Andrea, or somebody that I'm touring with. Most of the other music I play it once or 2 or 3 times, and then it's gone. So it's that other approach of like, bam, paint this picture and move on.
Well, they do say that in learning with the brain, if you write things out, even literature, if you words, that it helps you. That's why people journal. It helps the brain process that material.
And Steve Bagby, who unfortunately passed away, he was one of my teachers at University of Miami. He would say, journal those solos for me. He used to say that term, journal those solos. And we would go write out like Freddie Hubbard solos, or and figure out the phrasing of that stuff. And I mean, even when I study with Erskine, he would give me like Freddie Hubbard solos to write out, and then I every like above like B flat on the stave, if it was above B flat, it would be your right hand, or below B flat would be the left hand, in the phrasing of how he was playing things, to understand musically the way that felt and the way he was phrasing things in the music. And so that's a great example of journaling.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to shift gears a little bit into something else that you're really good at. Creating products. Like, we just talked about the staccato ride and why that came about. I have to be honest, in all the years I've known you, you don't just create something for the sake of creating it. Usually it's to fill a need or a desire or something you want. And I find that to be something very common with people who do that. Like, it's just the best stuff comes from a need that needs to be filled.
Necessity is a mother of invention.
Yeah, exactly. And you've done that your whole career. And I wanted to have you talk a little bit about, I mean, you've helped Zildjian throughout the years with different things. Obviously, you have your big first signature products. You have your own, now you have your own company. Like, you have all these other things going on with your own signature product. Can you talk a little bit about, there's too many to talk about all of them, but maybe just some highlights of some of those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like you said, a lot of it has to do with being in studios and recording media and trying to get something to do something, like the sub kick, for instance, like trying to get the bass drum to have the bottom end at 60 hertz, the presence at 60 hertz that an MPC drum machine had at the time, where, because I was going in on a lot of rap albums and hip hop records and playing the grooves on them, but they would program part of it and I would play part of it. And then, the samples that they were using sound like Godzilla, it's like, I can't get the drums to like have that level of, presence in those frequencies. So then like the sub kick thing that I did with Yamaha years ago, that was part of that. Or, we have the X click now with Groove X with the cross stick thing. That was the same thing with that, where it was like, I need a consistency, I want to hit that cross stick perfectly every time. And that's one of the things about the Vic Firth HD sticks. I have the little X right on the sweet spot of the stick for X HD or Extreme HD. That X is the sweet spot. So if you watch that X go down, it's a perfect cross stick sound. And that was me missing a few cross sticks, right? I would switch from the backbeat to the cross stick, and I would miss one or two until I zoned it in. Then the engineer would have to go back and sample one and drop it in or whatever. So it just took his time and energy. So for me, it was like, I want to be able to nail that first time. So all that stuff, the cymbal tip, the cymbal sound from the tip on the Extreme HD stick, it's such an articulate, beautiful cymbal sound. And it just, the guys in R&D at Zildjian for years would use this stick to test some of the cymbals, because it really made a beautiful tip sound, and they could really get the articulation from the cymbal. And anyway, and then the same thing with the brushes. The brushes were a thicker bristle that was a different one in the writing hand than the sweeping hand, because the writing hand, the bristle is thicker, so it's got more rebound. You can play quicker and play more writing patterns. It's all just stuff that comes up. I'm doing something, and I go, I wish this did that, and I'm just stupid enough to try to make it do it. It's like, it's the mix of stupidity and faith. I'm just dumb enough to think we could do this, and I have faith in us to think it's possible.
I think that's kind of the right combination to get it to happen, for great things to come about. It always has been.
I love working with Zildjian. Obviously, this next year's my 30th year with Zildjian, so it's been a lot of stuff over the years. But Avedis hi-hat. The Avedis line, I was really involved with that a lot. Karope towards the end. A lot was K Custom Special Dry.
Which, by the way, that splash there is ridiculous.
It's stupid.
Wow.
It's foolish.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a prototype of the 10-inch K Custom Special Dry. That it's just ridiculous. And these hi-hats are insane.
Yeah.
They record like $1 million.
Yeah, it's amazing. So, all right. So let's talk a little bit about some of the people you played with. Been a bazillion of them. Like you've had, classic, classic groups like Fifth Dimension, to, comedians, Don Rickles. We could probably do a whole thing on just the stories from Don Rickles, right?
Oh God.
To like Melissa Etheridge, Jennifer Love Hewitt,
just to hang with him,
why wouldn't you?
We're everybody. You would show up on the band, and it was like this superstar $200,000 a night band. Everybody's making $400 because they just want to hang with Rickles.
Yeah, that must have been amazing.
It was,
and like even some of the, I remember when you did Nelly Furtado's record.
Yeah.
Nobody knew who she was.
I remember. I remember sitting.
Yes, I was going to tell that.
And
Go ahead.
Played "I'm Like a Bird" for you, and you're like, "That song sucks. That's not gonna work." 9 million copies. I'm going, I don't know. It sounds like a hit. Like, yes, man. No one's gonna dig that. I'm like, okay.
I don't know if I went that far. I don't know if I said it like that, but I didn't. Yeah. Well, that's why I'm not in the record business.
But there's a lot of them like that where you go, I don't think that's going to fly at all, and it's huge. And then there's other ones you're like, this is going to kill, and like it goes plywood with an anchor tied to it.
Yeah, that happens to me a lot. A lot of the things I hear that I love, just yeah.
Well, it's been like you mentioned, there's a lot of different. I just love music, man. So I love playing music. The Fifth Dimension. It's funny. There's an old act like that. But daggone it, Billy Cobham played with them, and he played some of those records, and Hal Blaine did all those parts. And I remember telling Hal when he was alive, God bless him, that back in the day when I was doing the Fifth, and he's like, I love playing with those guys, because they had odd times, and they, it was just great music. And but even like I said, it's finding the art. Like when I was in the Psychedelic Furs, it's the same thing. It's like finding the art of that. You know, they were a really cool and interesting band because they were a part of the original punk movement, like Sex Pistols England punk movement. So, you know, half of the gig I'm doing this. And the other half of the gig, I'm playing, you know, this. Because they had all those hits in the '80s, like Heaven and Pretty in Pink, and you know.
I think we have a video of you playing with them. I want to watch that.
Boy. Okay, go do
There's a hole in the sky where the sun don't shine. I'm a clock on the wall and it counts my time. And heaven is the Lord. And heaven won't tear you apart. Yeah.
Look at that, rock star. Richard Butler is one of those guys that lives in rock star land that he can do this and spin in a circle and look totally cool doing it. Right? Like if I did that, you'd be like, "What happened to Miller? Like he's lost it."
Oh, it's so good. It's like,
Yeah.
you
know, that thing was like, for me, you look at a tune like that, like Heaven, it's like, can I play that Go-Go's, you know, We Got the Beat thing, you know, with the kick drum, dun, dun, da, dun, dun, da. Can I play that perfectly consistent, make it feel great, and keep it at the same tempo at 10 seconds as 4 minutes and 10 seconds, you know? And there's some of the art of that, and really working on that kind of stuff.
how I have to ask this? How did that gig come about?
I got that gig because I was playing with on the Melissa Etheridge Meredith Brooks tour, and the management of Meredith, I think, was also the management of the Furs, and Frank Ferrer was the drummer in the Furs for years, and he got the gig with Guns N' Roses.
Oh yeah,
I think the management said to Frank like that they knew me, and he was like, oh no, that, you know, he'd be great or whatever. And then they asked me to come, and I never auditioned. I got the gig, and I think I can't remember where the first tour was, but it was far, like in Australia or something. And I think I got the gig like 5 days before we left for the tour, and we rehearsed for like a day and a half. So I wrote out the entire show, and I had a book, and I kept it under the hi-hat, and I didn't need glasses back then, so I could see it. And I, you know, so a lot of the first tour, I'm like this the whole time because I'm checking my charts. But then, you know, again, once I play it 4 or 5 times, then I would know it. But it was like that. And there was other gigs like Bobby Caldwell too that I remember. I was working with Al Jarreau in Minnesota, and I got a call that Bobby needed a drummer like 2 nights later. And I wrote out Bobby's entire big band show on the plane on the way to meet him somewhere. I can't remember where. And then I stayed on, you know, I got the gig and I stayed on that gig for like 6 years.
Which, by the way, some of those stories that you can't really repeat them, I don't think, but they're some of the best stories I've ever heard.
Genius. Some of the stuff you can't make up. Man.
Oh, so good. All right, well, let's talk about your stuff now. A little bit of your stuff, especially like you mentioned a little bit about Arrival, which is an amazing record with all those different drummers that you're playing with. I mean, it's a great album.
Yeah, thank you.
But then, go ahead, talk about that first.
Go ahead.
Well, I want to definitely hit the record with Geo. I mean, that the two became one record is unbelievable.
I mean, Arrival, I've had, you know, as a session musician, you playing other people's music all the time, you know, so it was like an opportunity for me back in the day. I owned studio stuff and was building studios, not like what I have now, but, you know, I mean, you remember, I mean, we we did like the first CD for the first book at a studio, I think, and then like after the next book or DVDs, I took the advances and I bought gear and I just started building the studio because it took so much time and effort. I was like, I didn't like the pressure of, having to do all. Remember those book CDs? They had like 200 tracks.
I
And
know.
I was like,
I know.
and we had to play. Remember, it was like 4-limb independence, like 1, 2, ready, play, like 4-limb. Like you're going, dude, this is like, what are you talking about? Like I might play that somewhere in a song, but I'm not going to start like on the downbeat with. But so it was kind of hard to do that stuff. But anyway, I started doing solo record stuff when we started making the songs for those books and stuff. And that started me writing material and working with the guys to write material for a lot of play alongs. So like a lot of my books, the Drum Set Crash Course Transitions and Commandments of R&B Drumming, the stuff I did with Zorro, and we had tons of play alongs with all that. We were writing all those songs and producing them. So I started doing solo record stuff, and I think I got 7 or 8 now. The one is Arrival that you mentioned, which is it's a massive project. It's got 30 huge musicians on it, everybody from Nelly Furtado and Meredith Brooks and Jack Soul and everybody who sang as guests, to Gad and Steve Smith and Rick Marotta, Kira Jimbo, Wolfgang Hafner, Pete Loggett, Luis Conti, Rick Marotta, Steve Smith. I mean, everybody. We all did these composed pieces of music with the band and choir where the drums were interplayed and written out, and it's very musical. It's not, there's certainly a ton of drum stuff on it, but it's not like Go Off Drumland. It's
not that at all.
Yeah.
And it's great.
And the interplay is dope because we did things where it was split, where you can hear Gad here and the fills are kind of interplaying back and forth. But that started the Arrival project, quote unquote. And then we did some shows with that. And then it was impossible to keep that going. We had all the guests up on the screen on stage, and back then it was like a literal projector screen. And it was, Nelly was on there singing with us, or Gad was on there playing with us. And then it kind of turned back into a trio with Rick Creevy and Jerry Watts. And then we've done several records with that trio, and we've toured all over the world with that band. I mean, in Asia, yeah, there's a shot from Asia where we do like small arenas, like 3,500 people. And that's been amazing. We have a new album coming out called Soul, Mind, and Body, and it's a 3-movement piece where Kirk Covington, Pee Wee Hill from Rufus, and I do a soul piece, and then Ellis Hall was the guest singing on that.
Oh, wow. Great.
Yeah, and then Tony Monaco from Steve Smith's band, the B3 player, and the great Ernie Watts and I, we did the Mind part, and we have guest singers on that. And then on the Body part, it's Rick and Jerry and I, the regular Rival trio, and then Rick sings on that. So it's this 3-movement thing. It's a 3-disc EP set. It's a
very cool
project, but it was so fun to play with Tony and Ernie and play a different drum set, 4-piece straight up jazz thing. And then the other thing, we got remakes of Tower of Power songs as a B3 trio. And
really,
yeah, and Kirk is playing B3 and singing.
He's so talented, man.
He's a super talented nutball.
He is.
Yeah, but yeah, so that record's coming. But yeah, I mean, that it's been really fun that's my moment to see something through,
Well, the record with Geo, the 2 Became One record, where did you guys chart? It was up there.
Well, yeah, that was nuts. Right in the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
We released Things We Said Today, which is a remake of a Beatles tune, and it went to number 32 on the contemporary hit radio.
That's great.
Literally, it was like Megan Thee Stallion, Russ Miller, and Giovanni Hidalgo. I mean, it was actually really funny. We were starting to dress up like, in those costumes that Miley Cyrus wears and like take pictures of. But it was, yeah. I mean, maybe because like everything sort of leveled, right? Nobody could do tours and nobody could do the big TV show promo. So for a minute there, it became about like a song for a minute, and we placed really well. And that single, Things We Said Today, from To Become One, it was number 32. It was in the top 40. So I'm a top 40 artist, so you'll have to talk to my management next time we do. But anyway, that, what do you say about doing an album with Giovanni?
I know,
he's
that's
the
a
buddy
dream
for
come
the
true.
Pogas. Yeah. He's beautiful, and I love him like a brother, and it was ridiculous. And we went to Miami in Studio A at Criteria, which is like, I mean, I did a lot of records there because I lived there, but I mean, I one time James Brown rented my drums, my recording custom kit back in the day for Clyde and Jabbo, and I got to sit through a James Brown record, the Overdue record, actually, in Studio A. And then, Layla and all the Sound Machine stuff and the Bee Gees and Saturday Night Fever, and it just goes on and on and on. And you're in that room, and with Gio and with Jerry Watts and Enrique Pantoja, who's an amazing artist from Brazil, who I've done a lot of records with, and then Richie Bravo, who's a great friend of ours. He guested on some percussion stuff, and Rick Creevy sang on Things We Said Today, and then my friend Jimmy Riccolo, who's a brilliant blues singer, guitar player, he did a single called Love of My Life. And anyway, that record, I mean, that's a joy. It's just a joy. What else do you say about it?
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. It's beautiful. So, all right. So look, we've been going here for an hour and a half almost.
Really?
Before we conclude, I just wanted to give you talk to me a little bit about what you've been doing lately. I mean, we're coming out of this thing. Seems like things are starting to roll back. You got your company, Groove X, now rocking. You got the record label going. I mean, give me a little bit of what's coming up for Russ Miller.
Yeah, Groove X is out, and it's just some of my products that I've developed over the years with different companies that, now I'm, the patents are available for me and that I've done, like the X Click, which is the cross stick thing. And then we have the Mundo part. You could probably see on the overhead, or even the foot cam, maybe.
Yeah, see it.
On the foot, try the foot cam. You can't quite see it there, it's down here. But anyway, we got a bunch of other products coming with that, and groovex.com is where you can check it out, or tons of dealers, Guitar Center, everybody. But anyway, the label, Kirk Covington's on the label. He's killing it. Kirk is, he was number 28 this week on AC radio on the chart for adult contemporary radio for his song Always the Same. So we produced that and we did the video. I mean, Kirk Covington is number 28 on the AC chart, man. I mean,
that's so great. And he's so many people need to know about him, that he's just such an amazing talent.
So Arrival and Kirk and Gio and George Shelby and great sax player. There's a bunch of guys on that label that we've done records for, and we get them out there and do some stuff with. And Kirk's been doing great. Arrival, of course, does well. I'd been doing a bunch of movies. Some of them are coming out now. I did Connections, the new Sony animated movie. I did Stillwater, which is the new Matt Damon movie. I think that.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
They were all held up a little bit, because of COVID, and now they're.
Yeah, everything got held.
Yeah. So a bunch of movie stuff, and then the tour thing. There was two or three tours that I was going to go on that are still floating in the air. That I'm not quite sure what's going to happen with that. I do have the new Arrival record, which is Soul, Body, and Mind, and that's coming in September. And we got this new studio. I just moved, and we got a much bigger, nicer studio than the other one, and a sound stage and everything. So it's a whole new company that does online concerts and events, and you'll see a lot more from that coming in the fall.
Awesome.
So
all right, cool.
The staccato ride and the Extreme HD sticks and the brushes and hats and shirts.
All right, we're gonna stop.
I mean, we got anything. What do you need?
All right, let's wrap it. I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for making the time to do this with us. And
of course.
I can't wait to finally see you in person again. I mean, it's just been a crazy year and a half, man.
The longest I think we've been apart in 30 years, but
it's crazy, man.
Well, thanks to everybody, Emily, and for helping with with everything from Zildjian and Vic Firth. I mean, you know, Vic Firth and Zildjian are literally family to me. I mean, 30 years of, you know, doing stuff, and they're, I mean, it's so funny with instruments, because you go, well, anybody can buy this ride, but it's like every one of them's a little different, and every one of you are going to play it a little different, and it's more like giving you a conversation, and then you go and fill it in, you know, and that's the way I look at these instruments. But I mean, there's just nothing better on the market. Everything that I've ever seen or played is just a sick copy of a Zildjian, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
And,
I think, you know, it's kind of funny. I don't think a lot of people.
That's, you know, it's almost Zildjian, but
Yeah, it's.
these are killer instruments made by incredible people, and I mean, they've been a part of everything that I've done. And you know, the challenge for me, just real quick, is, you know, I get hired by, if it's a film composer or artist or whoever, and they expect a certain thing, and not only do they expect a certain playing, but also a delivery quality. You know, of, you're not going to show up with janky drums, and you're not going to show up with. They just know, and that's the point of it. Is like when you get hired in the music business, that it's like you fill a hole, as in, like, they're an employer. Once they hire you, like that, they don't have to worry about that. You know, and that's done. Drums are done. You know, let's move on to this, blah, blah, blah. And that's the key. And all of this stuff is a part of it, is showing up at a high level, playing at a high level, of course, being a decent human being, but also delivering a consistently high level of sound. And Zildjian and Vic Firth are certainly a huge part of that.
Well,
I mean, the sticks alone are, you know, this is it. This is the connection between the heart and the instrument. And everything we play is here, delivered through here. It's not out here, you know?
Yeah.
This is not where it happens. It has to happen in here, or it's just a bunch of notes.
Well, we couldn't do it without guys like you, man. Your valuable input and just your knowledge of the instruments, and just knowing, you know, we're just very fortunate. We have some of the best in the world playing, and I think greatness attracts greatness, and it's we're just very thankful and humbled to have you and others like you on the roster. So thank you for that.
I appreciate it. Yeah. It's a dream. You know, I've been a Zildjian artist for 30 years, but I remember my first Zildjian cymbal. I sold my Star Wars toys in a yard sale, and I bought an 8-inch A splash, and I hung the bag behind my drums on the wall because I was so excited that I finally got a Zildjian cymbal. And years later, I always told Johnny D the story, because John DeChristopher, who was the AR guy who signed me back in the day, when I got the contract to be a Zildjian artist, it sat on my table for like 2 weeks because I just could not connect. I could not connect that Zildjian, that I had done something enough for the legacy of Zildjian to be interested in what I could bring to them, you know. And that was, it took me a minute, but I finally connected.
you got past it.
Eventually, so.
All right. Well, look, we're gonna end this with I think we're gonna do a clip with you and Gio from the last record. So we'll do that, and then thank you again, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Take care, Russ.